Welcome to Leaving with Common Ground. This is a place for conversations that help us discover what we share. Today's story begins with a horse, an outhouse, and one of the most embarrassing moments of my childhood. But it's really something else entirely. It's really asking the question, why some stories stay with families for generations. Welcome to Leaving with Common Ground. I hope you enjoy this episode. What becomes a story worth telling? I was trapped in an outhouse by a horse when I was 7 years old. I didn't know it at the time, but Red, a large roan gelding, had figured out how to unlatch the wooden toggle bar and open the door of the two-hole outhouse that served as the bathroom on my grandparents' farm. Once open, Red would step into the stall, filling the space with his head, neck, and withers, trapping the person against the back wall while they sat on what served as the toilet seat. On the day he trapped me, I was terrified. There I sat, finished with my business, my pants down around my ankles with not even enough room to reach the toilet paper. I started to call for help, but like any appropriately placed facility, the outhouse was situated far from the house, so all things of nature remained outdoors. And calling out for help seemed to excite Red. Exciting a 1,000-pound horse in the confines of the outhouse felt like a bad idea. So I sat there and imagined the worst. I concluded that if I screamed, Red would panic and launch me high into the air across the pasture, while my grandparents watched quizzically as pieces of the outhouse rained down around the farm. There I'd be, crumpled up, legs akimbo, lying in a sea of debris. Looking back, I have no idea whether Red was capable of any of this, but at 7, the scenario seemed entirely plausible. I decided it was best not to aggravate him. He sniffed me up and down, seeming to catalog me in his files as the annoying 7-year-old, a shy pooper. Eventually he left. I pulled up my pants. Mustering all the indignation I could, I marched my 7-year-old self through the back door of the farmhouse where my grandma was at the kitchen hand pump, pulling water from the well to make the day's coffee, with the greatest outrage I could muster. Hoping to score the sympathy points needed to avoid the dreaded chore of weeding the garden, I told her about my encounter with Red. Seeing my quivering lips worked up for effect, she asked if I was hurt. I said I wasn't. She said, "Well, Red will do that from time to time. He sees the outhouse as part of his territory. Don't be afraid to kick him out next time. We've all had him interrupt us." What? That was it? Kick him out next time? I thought, she does not understand what I have been through. A horse bullied me while I was doing my business. As it turned out, I had badly overestimated both the tragedy of the event and its usefulness in getting out of weeding the garden. I was never launched through the air. No outhouses were ever destroyed. My grandparents were never forced to explain to the neighbors why their grandson was ejected from the outhouse across the pasture with his pants down around his ankles. And I never escaped weeding the garden. In fact, I went back to the outhouse as it was impossible not to. I learned to deal with Red. I got accustomed to his visits. In time, I even began to welcome them. But it wasn't the last time I got that sort of, what happened reaction from my grandmother, my mother's mom. The farm required work. Any single chore wasn't easy, so my outhouse trauma, or the off-again, on-again battle with the large Chinese geese my grandfather kept, were usually met with the same response. You hurt? No? Okay. Then take it as a lesson. Don't do that again. Thinking back on it now, believe it or not, the outhouse story is always funny to me, especially when I retell it. I mean, how could anyone not laugh at I was trapped in an outhouse by a horse? Now, the whole episode rests in my memory as one of those strange moments that long ago stopped being about what happened and has turned into a story that has outgrown the event itself. My grandparents' farm remains one of the happiest places in my memory. It was a bit of a rundown place when my grandparents arrived there in Arkansas from Europe after my grandfather retired from the military. He served in the Army until 1958, after enlisting at the age of 16 to serve in World War II. He saw action in Italy as the American forces fought their way through to Germany to go on to liberate Dachau and other concentration camps. The visit with him to Dachau in 1971 as a kid is still a memory so vivid in my mind that I can to this day hear our footsteps on the gravel pathways as we walked from building to building. The scribble of the names on the dorm walls is etched there too. My grandparents bought the farm while overseas, well before moving there. I think they saw it listed in a handbill inserted into the Stars and Stripes newspaper. Not so much for my mom, who was already married and out of the house when they moved there, but for her siblings, her kids, and our cousins. The farm grew us as only farms can. Most of all, strangely, after all the life lived out in that little ramshackle holler, I remember my grandmother's beauty salon, tucked into a little building near the farmhouse. Women came and went all day long, always leaving better coiffed than when they arrived, and somehow happier too. Even the minister's wife came more often than her hair required, though I eventually learned she wasn't there for the shampoo. She was there because it was the only place where she could get away with smoking cigarettes. What happened at the farm has been transformed into stories that we all tell. They almost always involve family foibles, country adventures, farm mishaps, and joy. Memories like my grandfather's insistence that all tea and coffee be stirred at once in unison at the beginning of meals to avoid the annoying clink and clack later, or the terrible forays into farming and animal husbandry that my grandfather, a Jewish kid from New Orleans, should have never undertaken. Imagine surviving World War II only to be defeated by livestock. All the memories resonate in the way they do because they happened on the farm. I think that's why doing it wrong has become so important to me. And that, of course, includes the outhouse. Despite her reaction to Red's assault on me, I never remember my grandmother as cruel. She was a disciplinarian, strict, but she always felt loving, and that's how I remember her. She passed away in 1974 at the age of 48. We all miss her very much. But the question I'm interested in is, even with her death as a source of sadness, why are so many of the stories of the farm funny and happy? And a larger question lies beneath that one. What makes each one worth telling? I think stories told again and again, whether at family gatherings or in other social situations, act as connectors of sorts. They connect us to people we love, but every so often, you realize that some stories do something more. They quietly tend to our relationships. They help us remember not just what happened, but why the people in the stories still matter. Among the stories we tell, of course, are those we tell because we fear they may be our last memories of someone. And here, I'm thinking of my friend Ray, who you may remember from the episode of the same name, has been diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's. We spent some time with him and Pat recently, funnily enough, in the rural mountains of North Georgia. The stories retold and have retold 100 times seem to take on greater joy. We marveled at how often we've told the stories. Their retelling this time always included their histories. We'd say things like, Jesus, how often have we told this story? When did we first tell it? Was it before or after Julia broke her elbow? And things like that, trying to trace the life of our 40-year friendship. Stories are acts of love or forgiveness, sometimes at the same time. They help us come to terms with people and places we love, and with the possibility that one day they'll only live in the stories we keep telling. And in the case of Red's outhouse attack, the story is my homage to my grandmother, who resisted modern conveniences without ever thinking of herself as resisting anything at all. Indoor bathrooms eventually came to the farm, modern faucets replaced the hand pump, but she still believed the day should end with everyone gathered for supper around the large circular table in the center of the kitchen near the pot-bellied stove that provided heat in the winter. She was doing it wrong long before anyone thought to call it that. With Ray, our stories insist that the here and now be joyous. They always deepen love and push away the foreboding felt about the future. Perhaps stories worth telling are the ones that eventually become larger than the events that gave birth to them. I like to think Red would be pleased to know he became part of the family folklore, and somehow he continues to interrupt me over and over again. Mrs. Barry, host of Leaving with Common Ground. Hope you enjoyed listening today. This is a production of Inditch Films. All rights reserved for those that live on in our stories.